Hello, everybody. This is Dr. A, and this is the Conscious Forum. And I apologize, I'm a few minutes late. I actually was in the back bowls of Vail, Colorado, and there was a potential um, avalanche danger, so we had to go around, and so it took me a little longer to get down here. But we're together now, and I'm all jacked up. I've been thinking about all morning being with y'all, and we're going to have a great time today. So, for anybody that this is your first time in the Conscious Forum. This is designed really basically for consciousness and you and actually, how you can now work on your vertical development. One of the things I'm very clear of, especially with AI occurring, that if we're sleepwalking through life, we have absolutely no chance because AI is not only very intelligent, but it's being used by the largest corporations in the world to get you to do what they want you to do, not necessarily what you want to do. So it's really important to start first with self-awareness and then self-regulation and then advance beyond that. So that's why I do this forum. We're gaining audience. More and more people are dialing in. They really like it. They start to understand that starting things as simple as stop, challenge, and choose, we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of our life. So basically today we're going to be talking about something that's very important. Well, first of all, this is, if you go to drwayneanderson.com, all the sessions I've been doing over the last couple of years are there. They're in video form. There's content in there. Everything is totally free. And I've designed this to help us move to the next level of our health and our lives. So I wanted to talk today about how to build an integrated life, how to let go, really, how to understand that the world is happening. We have very little control over the outside world, but we have full control over how we respond to it, and that we determine the outcome. So we're going to talk today. We're going to start off with a little review because last month, I talked about the two main processes by which people live their lives. And I think it's really important to review this, and then we're going to focus on you and building an integrated life. So breaking down the process of life really is two parts. There's two aspects that we really are involved in what we do daily in our lives. Our lives is a continual set of days that turn into months, that turn into years. And, we're now well into, with March, we're into the third month now of our next rotation around the sun. And by now you probably settled into this year, over Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, we kind of settle and kind of think, okay, what is next year going to be like? What am I going to do differently? But unfortunately, if we're basically using the first process, which we're going to describe, probably not much has changed. What we want to do is focus, and if you haven't engaged now in the second process, we're going to talk about that day, how to do that and how to make that a reality. So aspect one is an integrated life. Integrated life is what we're going to focus on today. It's basically emergent processes. And what I mean by that is we basically know we have a future. It's relational. We're going to work on the dynamics. It's warm, which means it feels good to us. It feels connected. We feel connected to other people. We don't feel isolated. By the way, loneliness is one of the fastest growing attribute of people in not just the United States, but in the world, where people feel disconnected. They feel like they're irrelevant, that they're not part of what's going on, and they're isolated. And it's not a good feeling. It's part of emotional mismanagement, and it's something that can lead to considerable dysfunction. And we feel connected. We're connected together. And that's what this forum is about, connecting us. And I'm working with some of the top thought leaders in the world, and we're really working on how do we provide an environment for people to now change their trajectory. And it's updatable. This is the most important part. You said around Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, that you were going to do some things different. You had new resolutions. New resolutions mean you were going to add some things that add value to life. That's updating. That's now changing. That's not staying with the repetitive pattern. That's actually updating where we are, where we're going. And when we're involved, when we're now in the process of becoming more, we are at our best as human beings. And that's when we thrive. And that's what we want to really focus on today. But first, let's just review what repetitive patterns mean. It's a stagnant process. If you're in repetitive patterns doing the same thing today that you were yesterday, same thing you were last month, last year, basically you are just getting more of the same. It's the same, it's the past, it's not really growing, it's not changing. And because the world is changing, the dynamics, the cheese has been moved, and it hasn't just been moved to the next room, as they said in the old book, it's been moved to a different planet. So with that, it's really important to understand without updates, we have thought patterns, we have emotional patterns, we have behavioral patterns, We have relational patterns, we have family patterns, we have work patterns, and we have generational, which actually go from one generation to the other. So if you were more likely to be overweight, your parents were more likely to be overweight, then you're more likely to be overweight. And these are patterns that unless we update and we change the data that's inside, then we don't change. So we get repetitive patterns that don't allow us to emerge and evolve. So what's happening? Basically, it's important to be non-judgmental as best you can. I mean, sometimes you'll beat yourself up, you'll sabotage yourself. But if things are cyclical in their life, the same things keep happening, we need to create more space around those things, more awareness. And that can bring change through the awareness. Without awareness, unless we understand that these things are going on, these patterns are happening over and over and over again. And if we're not aware of them, that's why journaling is so important, right? It's so important for us to write down your repetitive patterns, what you're feeling, how your body feels to those, what our behavior is when certain situations, and then we can address them. So then we can look through a new lens. We can now be open, curious, and how do I create the space around it? Not trying to change it immediately, but just understand, why am I sensing this? How am I feeling this? How am I in my relationship? If I have a relationship that every time I'm with this person, it seems to go south and I leave shaking my head, then I need to understand that. And, is it because of our culture? And also, what is missing? What is not allowing us to update and now grow and become more and move beyond that? So all these things are really important. So in essence, we have two basically processes: the repetitive patterns of the past, which we continue, or emergent patterns. These are the new things. These are the things where, 80% of what we have inside of us literally isn't serving to take us to where we really want to go. So if we sit down and ask ourselves, what do we, if you don't want to change, if you want to remain the same, then this stuff doesn't matter. But if you want to grow, if you want to learn, if you want to be able to keep pace so with the speed of the world and be able to cope with, not just cope with it, but actually thrive in it, then it's important to develop emergent patterns. So let's talk about an integrated life. This is kind of what I wanted to really focus on. And let's start by looking at the key areas of well-being in our life. There's 7 key categories: our physical health, how we move, how we feel, how are we within that on a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But where is our health on a scale 1 to 10? Vocational, what we do for a living. It's interesting, but they did some studies and looked at vocation, and what we do for a living is twice as important as anything else in terms of how we have a sense of well-being, that we're connected, that we're doing something that's important. That's why updatable to emerge is so important. Financial, how are our finances? How do we manage money? Is money a foreign thing to us? Is something we think is bad or evil? Mental, obviously, this is a big one, and one I work on all the time with people and with myself. I'm looking on growing to build my emotional management, so I'm more emotional agile, and whatever's thrown at me, I can handle it. Familial, I mean, obviously, our family is important, and how do I deal with my family relationships? Social, our social interaction with others, and of course, our spirituality for each and every one. But these are the 7 key areas, and it's really important to look at those, and you should write that down. What we value most determines our purpose. So our highest valued areas need little motivation. And I always talk about, if you were a mom and you were on the 50th story of a building and your kids were in the room across the way, and there was a fire broke out in the middle and you couldn't get to them through the traditional inside, but there was a ledge off of your balcony that could get to their balcony, and it's 50 stories high and it's a small ledge like this. Would you think twice before getting on that ledge and going over and getting him? And the answer is, of course, no, because you value very much of utmost highest value, obviously, are your children, especially, a mom that's innate. And so you would think just a second and then you'd be on your way to go save them. So the things we value most basically don't require as much motivation. So taking charge of these 7 key areas leads to optimal well-being. If you don't value a key area, someone else is going to take charge of it. So we very much know, if you don't value your health, the food industry and all the nasty foods and potato chips and stuff, you'll be buying those things and you'll be basically helping them make more money and be more successful. Become clear on what you value most. This sets the stage for everything as we integrate, because the things that are most important to us of those 7 key areas will determine whether you're making progress or not. And I love this slide. I'm actually up here in the mountains, and I went out to dinner, last week, and we went to a remote place up in the woods on the side of the mountain, and it kind of looked like this. I mean, obviously it was bigger than that, but I can tell you 100 years ago, before there was electricity, before there was civilization, before there's anything there, living in a little place up in the woods would be really tough. I mean, now it's fun. You got to eat and you have meals. And I had fish, that halibut that was from Alaska that was flown in. I mean, we live in a very different world, and our technology has certainly done many things to make life more comfortable. But bottom line is, if you were out 100 years ago and you were out in the middle of the snow, in the middle of the mountains like that, and you saw a warm cabin like that, you notice there's a straight line right to the cabin. You're not going to dilly dally. You're not going to go left and think, well, I think I'll work on this one for a while, or I think I'll sit out and look at the stars. So no, you were going right there. That's what your highest valued area is. So it's so important for us to find what we value most, and that will propel you. Basically, our current life, we're in a fishbowl, and depending on what your life's like, I mean, people rate their life, and certainly you want to rate your life in those 7 areas. And most of us, what we think we can do, but what we really want is more. And once you figure out what the things you value most, what your purpose is, what you value most, it can propel you all the way to the big fishbowl, the one you really want, that has the nice grass in it and the nice view and everything. So it's important to kind of put that in what you value and what you prioritize. So if you look at the 7 key areas, and you should take a screenshot of this, I think it's important, because you're going to want to do this work on your own. We're not going to have time to do the work. We'll talk about it today, but you'll have to do the work on your own. But take those 7 key areas that are important, and then you're going to figure out what you value most. And there's language helps us know the truth. Our limbic area, our emotional area in our brain, doesn't have language, but our prefrontal cortex, our human brain, the upper brain, if you happen to have the habits of health, you can go into element 4 in the life book, and you can look and see how the brain develops. But the highest part of the brain basically is linguistics. And if we look and we ask ourselves, right, because truth is the great liberator, of the 7 key areas, if we categorize using the language, so take a snapshot of this one too, of those 7 key, and I'll put this will be on the website. But if you look at those 7 key areas, ask yourself in each of those 7 key areas, what language you use to describe your relationship with that area. So let's take your physical health. If you're saying I have to, or I ought to, or I need to, in terms of your physical health, you're not going to do anything. But if you desire to, you choose to, and you love to, some people, basically over time learn to love going to the gym, or they love going for runs or for walks. And over time, it becomes important to them. And that's what you want to look at the key areas, because what you want to do is start with the ones that you love to do. So take all 7 key areas, and then take the language from here, and ask yourself, in these 7 key areas, where's my North Star? What are the ones, if they're have to, ought to, or need to, as you can see, they're smaller. Those aren't things you're going to want to focus on in the beginning. You're going to want to focus on the ones that actually are important to you, that you love to do, or choose, or desire to. Because what that will do, that'll start you on a path, and then you can organize your life around it. So these are my hierarchies. I put them down. Mine is, as far as vocational, is to become a world leader in health and well-being, to actually help pioneer vertical development or consciousness for anyone that raises their hand that wants that. And in support of that, just like, today, I got up early this morning. I knew normally I don't like to get up crack at dawn, but I did, because I wanted to get in some skiing, because it's a powder day. And I went up with a good friend of mine, and we went up, to the deep powder, and got in 2 hours of really intense skiing. So that supports my physical, clears my mind. The spirituality of being out in nature was amazing. Financially, obviously, we do this. We bring value to the marketplace, so that's important. And my family is ultimate. Last weekend I went to Phoenix to be with my daughter, who just got accepted to vet school, and we were there for our open house and to find her place to live. And I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Those 3 days together, and now we were even kidding around as she's going to be the young new Dr. A. So it continues on, and so these things are really important. The social are supported by spirituality, because I love helping people, and the mental part is at the base, you can see, of all of it. But they all work together, and so it's important to kind of find out what are the things that are most important. It might be family, it might be being a mom. It doesn't matter what they are, but then you can organize them in a way where you see they support each other. Because if I'm physically, spiritually, financially, and healthy in my family, then I'm able to spend more time helping others. And I'm also then, because of that spirituality, I have a good social interaction, and I'm mentally in a sound place. So hopefully that's important. So just taking, once you've got all of them, you want to basically take each area and you start with the ones, as I mentioned, that are you value the highest. And a good way to kind of categorize is, you should snapshot this too, is the physical. This happens to be an example of physical area of well-being. So role model, who do you admire? Who's someone that you look up to that is a great physical specimen? And then B, who are you? And who and what would you love to be? So in terms of, I'm focusing on physical, but you use this for all 7. What would I love to be? What would I like to look like? What would I like to feel like? What kind of energy level? Do, what are you doing? What am I doing? And one of the things I'm doing is I love to do is I went up and skied this morning. So, and have, what do you have now because of what you're doing? What will you have after you've done that? So in other words, the more you work on it and you start updating that process, the more successful you'll be. So I'd like to now just kind of open this up for questions. Let me take this off the screen share and we will open it up for questions. So Rachel, who we got?
We actually haven't gotten any questions yet.
No questions.
No, not yet.
Okay, so let's talk about, let's take somebody that wants to. Oh, Chris, go ahead, Chris.
I got a question for you. This is applicable right now. Dr. A was on the mountain, doesn't know this, but Facebook, WhatsApp, Messenger, Facebook, and Instagram were all down for an hour this morning. 1 hour. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but to people that live in social media, it can be a little cumbersome, a little crazy. I don't know if anyone else in chat was dying. Yeah, people are mentioning they were dying in there mentally. What do we do in those situations? If you find yourself in a situation like that, where something that you rely upon for probably 50% of your daily duties, your daily activities, what do you do when it's just suddenly shut off?
Well, I didn't even know it happened because I was up on the mountain. So I'll start there. Plus the other thing about social media, it's nice to feel connected, but having a hiatus like that, I would say that's a great time to journal. And I think Chris, you asked a great question. So, what did you feel like? Were you stressed? Were you anxious? Did you really miss that time? Because, one of the things, and I'm getting ready to be going to a retreat with 20 top conscious leaders for 4 days, and we're not allowed to have our phones there. It's totally silent. So you take care of obviously the things, and families know where there's alternative things they can go if there's an emergency. But beyond that, that period is we are on this electronic leash, and the leash has become so dependent on it, and we've used it as a coping mechanism that it basically is. I think it's an awesome thing to have happen. And if it's something about health or something where someone needed to get to communicate, but the phones still work, right? The phones worked. So you can still go the old-fashioned way and call. And I would actually say maybe that hiatus, those three hours, were a time for people to reflect that, do you want to be tied to the electronic leash all the time, or do you want to become aware and put yourself in position? So I think it's really, really, really important for us to realize that dependency on electronics is not necessarily in our best interest. In fact, I would say, all you have to know is that when you go on the internet or go to social media, I mean, you're flooded now with AI, right? Everything you've ever bought or thought about buying or said you like, now you're bathed in a circle of it. And it's actually not allowing your human mind to think for itself. It's actually getting you to, basically almost like a spinal animal. Oh, I like that. And then you're spending 20 minutes buying something you neither need or really want, but it looks cool. So you buy it, you just put yourself more in debt, and you got yourself something else, some junk that over a month or so you're not going to use anymore. So I think for me, I would say actually that was probably a good thing for most people, but most people, I bet, actually were stressed about it. They're upset about it. They basically, so that's a good calling out for you to say that maybe you need to do some of this work.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. A.
Yep. Thank you for intervening while Wanda came on.
Wanda? Yeah, Wanda, can you come on?
Hi, Wanda.
Hey, so I had a question right off the bat, and I hesitated because I asked a question in November and then followed up with you last month. So I wanted to kind of give space for other people, but I thought, hey, if no one else has a question, I'm coming on. So I have been on a health journey for 2 years utilizing our program. and the habits of health and all of those. And I still feel I'm very new at actually applying it all. Now that I'm almost to optimal health, I'm trying to apply it to finances, relationships. And sometimes I get really overwhelmed by trying to apply all of these principles to every area. And then I'm getting in a repetitive habit I'm noticing, and I am working with my health coach and a therapist, but I just wanted to see if you'd speak to this because I can't be the only one. Like sometimes to try to apply all of these things, it makes sense, but because I lived 50 plus years in a whole different mindset that created the unhealthy version of myself that I began working on 2 years ago, when I start transferring these to every area, it almost feels unbearable and I'll just collapse, like just not be able to do it. Does that make sense? And I'm trying to take it slow and I'm trying to apply all of this to every area, but it can get a little bit overwhelming to try to address every area of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. And first thing I love you to do is get rid of the word try. Try is the most demoralizing word in the English language. It means, oh, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it the old, try. But I now have said, well, I tried and I couldn't do it. So you either do, or Yoda that sat there in the swamp with his fighter jet, with Luke's fighter jet, and Luke tried and he couldn't lift it. He moved it a little bit, and then Yoda brought it right up. He's either do or don't do, right? And so that's the first thing. The second thing is the reason why there's 7 key areas to focus on, but you got to find the ones that are the most important and start there. And what you're really looking to do, it's not like you're going to go do like 70 things in each key area. You find the area, like that's why I picked physical health just as the example, but you find the one that is really important to you. One, that kind of sets the keystone, right? It's the one that it's the key that in like an archway, right? That sets the arch and allows it to stand. It's the one that supports everything else. And you find that one and you work on that one first. And what happens is through the halo effect, it starts affecting your other behaviors. You're not looking to work on 7 areas simultaneously in every area of it. You may pick one little thing. So for instance, just around, and congratulations on almost being at optimal health, because that's a good thing and that's a great thing. So you've actually made dramatic improvement. The other thing we do is we beat ourselves up, like, oh, I've got this one thing going, but oh, I'm not so good in these areas. No one's good in everything. No one does everything great, right? In fact, that's why specialties occur. But the bottom line is, if you think of fundamental ones, and one of them to me always is physical health, the other one is always emotional health, because both those areas are key for long-term health and well-being, to be able to not just survive, but to thrive. So when you start in those areas, whatever areas you want, it could be your family, but when you start working in one area and you start saying no and using a full body yes, and you only say yes to when you feel it here in your mind, in your heart, and in your gut, then what happens is you're starting to clear the funnel. Right now, you have so much stuff in there. Most of the stuff you have in there isn't really serving you, right? About 80% of what you have in your thoughts and in your feelings aren't really serving you. Only about 20%. So you want to start emptying those things. And emptying those things includes everything from people to things to places to underlying structure of what you do. And you start looking at, is this serving? So that's why journaling is so important, because you can look and say, okay, in the next 5 years, I want these things to happen in my life. These are my future goals. I'm leading, and I'm going to lead from that future. In the present, you write down every day, what are the 7 or 8 key things you did during the day? And then you can get a green, an orange, and a red magic marker or a pencil. And you basically, next to those things, when at the end of the evening before you go to bed, you have your time for you, your time, Wanda, your personal time. You can write down next to them and put a red, a green, or an orange, whether green is if this helped move you towards what your goals are, orange if it didn't really have effect one way or the other, and red if it's actually taking you away from those goals. And so when you look at that, you'll find out that, in the beginning, you'll probably have more red than you would like. So your first goal is to simply start eliminating those things that are in red then basically eliminating the things that are in orange, and then focus on only bringing in things that are in green, right? That are moving toward, and that is intentional. You do that a little bit. Yeah, we're talking about in baby steps, little baby steps each day, changing. And what you're doing is you're now updating yourself and your identity, how you think about yourself. Like, because, you know, you're saying how you get overwhelmed and sometimes you self-sabotage yourself. And you do that because basically you're overwhelmed and you don't want to be overwhelmed. So it's not that you're trying to change this overnight. It's going to take time. I'll give you an example. It snowed a lot last night, and skiing in resort skiing, where the snow is either groomed or it's hard packed or you can feel the bottom, is different than in powder. In powder, you can't turn quickly because there's nothing down there to turn to. So you have to be patient. And the same thing with this. Like you said, for 50 years, you've been a certain way. It ain't going to change overnight. And so you're not expecting it to change overnight. You just want small little changes that occur over time. And as those occur, you know, there's a book by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy called The Gain in the Gap. And so what the ideals of what you want, there's a gap between where you are now, your current reality, and your desired outcome. And so what you want to do is basically figure out, okay, my desired outcome are these things. What are the secondary choices I have to start making, be able to move to that desired outcome? And so what you want to do is start eliminating the things that don't take you there and focusing on the things that do. And it's as simple as that. And if you add one thing, you're basically starting to move, and structural tension allows to pull you towards what you want because you care about it. That's why I showed the slide of the little hut up in the middle of the cold mountains, because if you know what you want, and in that case, you want, if you're out in the cold and it's at night and you're about ready to freeze to death, you see a little cabin, you're not doubting, you're going right towards the cabin. Well, you know the fundamental things now that are going to take you where you want. Those are the things you want to focus on. And then start, you know, every time you eliminate one of those on your journal, you eliminate one of those red and you add one of the green, you're now creating a double duplication. It's like in football when there's someone's on the team's on the 1 yard line and they throw an interception and the other team runs it back for a touchdown. That's a 14-point change in the game. That's a huge change, many times insurmountable. If you basically remove one thing that's not helping you and actually is hurting you, and you add one thing that is, that's a 14-point change, basically. Does that make sense? So focus on those little wins. And over time, what you'll find out is over a period of weeks and months, the new behaviors will take you, so you'll start changing your identity. Your identity are the standards you set for yourself. One of the standards I set a long time ago for myself is I make my bed every morning, even when I'm in a rush. I make my bed every morning because I know that that starts off the day in a constructive way. And there was a famous admiral that did a graduation speech and talked about that, you know, and little things like that, they actually start changing the way you think. And now you get in the creative process and you're focusing on what you want, not spending time in the past or what was wrong in the past. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you said this before to someone else, and it kind of went bloop. And now
Well,
you're
yeah.
typically saying it to me, but it's the journaling. Like
Yeah.
I'm sitting here taking notes while you're talking, so I am like one to write it down, but I don't journal. It's all in my head.
You
And
can't
so
keep it all in your head.
that's probably where I need to start, is the journaling. So
That would be a
right.
great place to start. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Because you have a conscious and a subconscious mind, right? Your conscious mind is what you're bringing and becoming aware of. Your unconscious mind or subconscious mind is below the surface, below the waterline. And there's things that have happened all the way since you were a little kid that are in there, and you don't really, you're not aware of a lot of them. And a lot of them are actually, they're basically part of your personal mind. You're the chief architect of your personal mind, which is your ego. And basically that's designed to try to keep you safe. And actually it's actually something that keeps you from fully being aware of what's going on. It makes up stories. It doesn't want you to feel uncomfortable. And that's one of the things as a human. We want to be comfortable. We're designed to be comfortable. That's why we have habits, and our bad habits served us at one time. They may not serve us now, but all the subconscious stuff you aren't even aware of. The only thing you're really aware of is the conscious stuff. So So bottom line is everything you have in your head dissipates. And so you may remember one thing I said, but not something else. And so what you want to do, and the thing that I do when I'm working on a concept or something that I want to learn, a new behavior, an updating, whether it's a ski move or it's a mental health issue or it's a physical activity or it's relational health of how to talk to someone. When I'm working on something like that I have not mastered, I basically go, if I'm reading a book about it, I underline it, I go back to it, I go back to it. The way you learn is through three parts: elaborative encoding, which means you find something that's similar to it. So the one I always use, because it's about memory, is there's a guy named Ebbinghaus, right? His first name was, I'm forgetting it right now. The guy, who was the goofy guy? Pee Wee Herman. His name was See, that's how I recalled it. I recalled it because I thought about something else that I knew, which was Pee Wee Herman. So now I remember his first name was Herman. Do you see that? So I'm able to recall that because I'm associating with something else that I remember, right? And I actually remember Herman's Hermits, Pee Wee Herman. So that's how I recalled it. So elaborate encoding means that you're actually finding something you already know and you're pairing it with it so you can remember it. So, Herman Ebbinghaus, I remember Ebbinghaus because you think of ebb and tide of a flow of the ocean, and basically a house floating back and forth in the ocean, right? So that's how I remember the name. So that's elaborative encoding. The second thing you do is spaced repetition. You go back to it multiple times and basically, so you actually learn it and memorize it. And the third is recollection. It's basically being recall. It's being able to remember it. So that's what I just did there. I recalled it basically by thinking about the name of elaborative encoding, and I brought it back. So that's how you learn new things, and you're actually changing your neural pathways through neuroplasticity. And that's how you can learn. Old dogs can learn new tricks. And basically, there are 80, 90-year-olds they've studied at Stanford that had serious issues of things like insecure attachment. So when they were babies, they never really got cuddled or cared for. And so they're kind of cold people. There was a lawyer that was 90 years old that went into Stanford and they did the work with him. And he came home to his wife, who he'd been ignoring, and started loving on her again because they work with that. So all this stuff is doable, but it's done in small little spaced repetition. Yeah, journaling is something because you have to write it down. But when you write it down, you now have it. I have a journal that I have right now in my, basically I keep it in my knapsack. And basically I can go through that. It's something I'm thinking about a couple of weeks ago that I'd heard or thought about. I can go back to it. So I'll take notes later today. I'm going to go back skiing when we get done here. But at the end of the day, I'll take notes on some of the things we talked about and then keep those to learn from them. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Well, good luck on that. You're doing great. Remember, forget looking at the gap, where you want to go and how far you have to go. Look at the gain and how much you've changed since you started working on yourself. It's dramatic.
It's
So use that.
incredible. Right. And I don't want to go back. And so when I start trying to move forward in another area, I can fall back. So I
There's
just,
no going back. It's always going forward. So when you start to think about something from the past, basically say, oh, I'm thinking about that, discard it. And remember, your past isn't the same as it was when it was happening. Your evolution of where you are now is different than there. If you have something from the past that was important for you, you can reconstruct it in the present to serve your future.
it's great. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're so welcome. Okay, who else we got?
All right, next up we have Shelly. Shelly, can you come on camera? And unmute. There you are.
Hi, Shelly. You're still muted. There you go.
First time. Just kidding.
There's always a first time.
So my question is, and thank you for taking time out of your skiing day to do this with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I apologize. I was late. I was ambitious thinking I could get down here in time.
I like it. Fun and work all at the same time.
Absolutely.
Integrated life, right?
I can tell, it's funny. Mickenfelter that wrote Hawaii and the Caribbean and stuff. He had I love a famous quote. I should find it. But he said, you know what? I'll let someone else figure out whether I'm working or playing. To me, it's both, right? And
Exactly.
that's how you want to live life. You want to continue to grow and learn and be a service of others, but you want to grow yourself too.
Exactly. I love it. So my question is, just a pattern that I have seen emerge, is that when people start making changes and shifts and they start growing and doing some of this consciousness and work and changing their health, I've noticed that it's a disruptor to a lot of relationships. And people feel threatened, by your changes, or especially in a marriage relationship. And if the other person isn't wanting to grow and evolve with you, sometimes it can seem like that's really where people hit a bumpy path, right? And then it seems like they make a decision either to just abort all of their changes and go back to the comfort zone to keep all the relationships comfortable and safe and things like that. And sometimes they can stop their evolution, or they have to make a decision to let those people go. And even sometimes in marriages, so that they can continue their growth path. And it's just a pattern I've seen emerge. I see more people stay in their comfort zone than actually continue to grow and evolve. They kind of will get so far, and then it's like all the relationships kind of snap them back. And I'm just wondering, how would you recommend supporting somebody walking through that journey? And it just seems like it can get messy.
Yeah, well, it can, no question about it. But and I'm going to be very forthright here. I really feel it's an excuse, because the bottom line is, if you're growing and you're becoming more conscious, your relationships with the people around you should become better. If you're proselytizing and you're trying to get them to do what you're doing and they're not ready for it, absolutely, that's like grinding salt in a wound. But if you're just working on yourself, because the only person that knows what's going on inside of you is you, right?
Yeah.
And in those relationships, I can give you a great example. My mother and I, growing up all the way through adulthood, and, even in our, as we've both gotten older, until about 10 years ago, when I started really working on this, we'd see each other for about 3 days, and we were both, we're kind of headstrong. And after about 3 days, we would just like fish, right? They start to smell. So you basically, leave. And that was that way for a long time, because I wasn't really working. I was busy building my career. I was busy, as a critical care physician. I didn't have a lot of time to work on that. I was very focused, working 80 hours a week. So it was good. I enjoyed being with my mom for a short period of time. Now I love being with my mom. And over the last 10 years, and basically what happens, before we would be like this, and now I'm down here and she would try to do this and nothing to do. So it would come down here. And so she didn't change. She hasn't changed. But our relationship has changed dramatically for the better. And it's because I've grown. And so if you're in an environment, and especially, let's take a spouse, because a spouse is the toughest ones. There's two reflections on that. One is, you can be kind and loving to your spouse, but what if you start becoming judgmental because they're not changing and you are, and you're starting to become more conscious, and you're judging them or pointing or trying to fix them, then yeah, it can become a major issue. But that's not what you should be doing. If you're becoming more conscious and becoming transformational, then basically you should be able to, anything you're starting to project on them, you should be wise enough now that you don't project it. You work on yourself, and why am I feeling that way? And then work on what it says about me, not about them. Okay, so that's the important thing. The other part of the coin is, if you're in a dysfunctional codependent relationship, and you start growing because you're miserable, and you're growing and becoming more and becoming more tolerant, and your suffering is starting to disappear, and the other person tracks the other way and withdraws more, then you have to ask yourself, for both of us, not just for you, but for the other relationship, is it best that we kind of accelerate this area where we kind of move? I have one of my other friends is a ski instructor. After 40 years of marriage, he's not studying this, but he realized in the relationship there was a codependency that wasn't working anymore. And so he made a decision, and we had a great talk. We had an hour talk the other day and about where he's going. And he asked me some questions because he knows what I do. And
Mhm.
now he feels strong. And he just emailed me last night and said, thank you for those things. I'm applying those and it's really helping. So I think you have to really ask the question, okay, because you're here. In essence, if you think about the drama triangle, if you're now not growing because your spouse doesn't want to do it and you basically stop doing it, then you're being a hero and now you're unconscious. Now you become unconscious and you're now supporting somebody and you're enabling them for more of the same behavior. That's not helpful for them long term. So does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It does. Totally. And I specifically see it mostly with women. They start to grow and evolve, and then the husband, gets controlling, because they're making money and they're working on their financial health, and they're having a life outside of just, the four walls of their home. And it seems like it's like threatening.
But you can't go back.
Yeah.
When you become more conscious, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once
Mm-mm.
you become more conscious, you're more conscious. And what you would be doing is role playing and faking it and creating a codependency if you try to go back. But you don't have to judge them. You don't have to try to get them to change.
Yeah.
And decide, is because what you're doing is uncovering something that was dysfunctional. And then you decide, can I now, because I'm becoming more conscious, can I be in a better relationship and more listen better, be more understanding, but not compromise what I'm working on? Because remember, if your relationship is a dependency, it's a codependency, or basically where it's conditional love.
Yeah.
It doesn't work long term. What
Mm-mm.
works long term is unconditional love, and the person you need to love, and I don't mean this in a narcissistic way, is yourself. You've got to come to the
Absolutely.
point
Yeah.
where you're fully content and moving from self-sabotage to start to be in the creative space where if that dysfunction is enough where it allows you to now change and you're actually being a better spouse because you're listening better, but you're not putting up with, well, just think about your kids. You can be a helicopter parent and do everything for them, or you can be an empowering parent and be there and have to have tough love sometimes, right? But you're moving them forward to be able to take care of themselves. In a relationship, you want a co-committed relationship where you both add value to each other. And
Yeah.
and again, it's up to you. Don't have to do this work, just like I said earlier. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to increase your standards. If you're happy where you are, but I
Mhm.
would actually ask yourself first, am I happy where I am? Because I would
Yeah.
say most people are suffering pretty dramatically in their relationships when they're
Yeah.
codependent. And as a result of that, they have to decide on, where they want to go and do it in a way which serves both 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 partners, right? And
Mhm.
by being more of a hero or a victim and saying, oh, I wanted to grow, but now I'm not because my husband doesn't want me to, that is not a good long-term strategy.
Yeah, I hear a lot of women say, like, I can't, like, my husband won't let me, and it's
Well,
like,
if your husband,
well,
if your
you're in
husband,
that.
yeah, if you're in that kind of relationship, that is not a relationship.
Healthy.
That's a dictatorship.
Right, right. So what is a question? I don't know if you can, what is a question that as somebody supporting people going through that, you would ask that woman? Because there's kind of, you don't want to meddle, but at the same time, you want to support the outcome of the evolution of the people that you're
Well,
trying
it
to
comes
serve.
down to, change. Okay. So let's look at comfort because that's where
Mhm.
most humans sit. And certainly in a relationship that's dysfunctional or codependent, it may be comfortable. There's a lot of suffering involved, but it may be comfortable. You have to ask yourself, the question is, am I willing to grow, be open, and want to learn, or is it more important for me to stay comfortable? Because comfortability in a relationship over time doesn't lead to a co-commitment, and over time the relationship usually gets worse and worse. And in a one-sided relationship where my husband won't let me, well, that's the female being the victim. She's being the victim and letting it happen. And basically some relationships, and 50 years ago, the Catholics didn't divorce, right? So you kind of stuck with it. So, but the world has changed, and the world and decisions and, those things have dramatically changed. If you try to stay in a paradigm that was 50 years old, now with everything around you changing,
Mhm.
then it creates a lot of suffering. So, that, but I never tell people what they should do. I'm
No,
simply
no,
here to
never.
listen. I'm only here to
Yeah,
listen and help awaken them to the
right.
to the point where they have choices, and they have to make that decision. And but what ends up happening, change occurs when your vision of what could be
Mhm.
and the dissatisfaction of what is greater than the resistance of change. If you think about it. So
Yep.
that's how it works. If you have a vision of now what my life can be, and I'm now dissatisfied to the point where I'm ready, and the combination of those two, the vision and the dissatisfaction, are greater than the resistance. The resistance is the fear of change, right?
Mhm.
And then so then you have the first steps, and then you move into change. And
Yeah.
and change is
Into
inevitable.
creation from drama triangle to empowerment
Empowerment,
triangle.
empowerment.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you know what? When you're living, just like I told you about vocation, if there's something you love and the things you value the most, if you're focused on those and you're improving those and making the things that matter the most to you, then you're in the joy of your life. That's when you're
Mhm.
in true joy. That's when you thrive. That's when the work becomes not work. It becomes
Mhm.
just joy, right? And I love like this, I wouldn't have missed, I mean, I was having a great day skiing, but I wouldn't miss this because if one person changes, then that's basically, that's made me have feedback that we're changing the world one person at a time, right? And the world's pretty messed up right now. And we need more people to rise up and become conscious. So that vertical development, I believe, is more important than anything else in actually evolving our lives. And I think we're put here to evolve our souls, right? I think early on, our soul was in service of our ego. But I think as we get older, I think that we become in service of our soul, which is to add benefit to others and to have great relational health. That's what you
Mhm.
want. And if you have a totally codependent relationship, that's not great relational health.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome. Okay, who's next, Rach? We have time for a couple
All
more.
right. We have Mary. Mary, there you are.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, good morning, Dr. A. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is spot on with what Shelley just shared and Wanda, and also you, Dr. A. You mentioned earlier, like as we grow, we find relationships that we continue to struggle with, and very similar to you, Dr. A. Like my relationship with my family, like my nucleus, like my mom, my mother, my father, my brother. um we were dysfunctional from the start. Like I was born into this very like toxic, chaotic environment, and I really felt like the parent at a very young age. And as I'm older now, I'm almost 40, I just had a baby, like I'm growing. The more I grow and work on myself, I have a therapist, I have you, I have the team, the community, and like a spiritual mentor. I have a hard time finding peace with the fact that I've pretty much have done all that I could, and I don't want to, I know I can't change them. And my growth has been a lot different than theirs. And I'm just, I struggle with finding peace. I think culturally and spiritually that we are better off, separate. Like we're better off with distance. And we all discovered this. We had a very traumatic event in 2005. I'm sure you remember Hurricane Katrina. We're from New Orleans, and after that event, like my parents divorced, we all split up, we all took our separate ways. I was barely 20 years old. And, the space was all good for us. We all, had our own lives and our own things. And over the years, we've, reconnected, and we've tried to like kind of, I guess, have a relationship. But like, just like you, like after a day or two of us being visiting with each other, it's like all these old things come up, and it's like the kink in the chain comes up. And for me and my husband and my family, we're like, we've realized like we're just better off having some distance.
Mhm.
Um, and there have been times where I'll fall back in that old pattern of like, no, well, maybe like because they're going through a hard time, and like my mom will follow me. If I move to China, she'll move there, you know, like they'll think. So I guess the whole point, like I'm going back to the question is just how do you find peace with that breakup? Especially when it's like a family, a parent, you know, a sibling, without that guilt, you know, that cultural guilt, spiritual, because sometimes, you know, I mean, without asking for advice, people unsolicited, like, oh my God, like you're so lucky, like you have your parents, you have this, and like, you know, and if I even start to say, well, we're not that close, or like I don't really take care of them, like, you know, my culture is like everyone lives together and everyone's dysfunctional and stuff. And so I just want to find a place where like I kind of fear like now that I'm a parent, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want this to come back to like haunt me or hinder my success. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
no, it makes perfect sense. And, you know, and understand this, you found a equilibrium, right? And the equilibrium, and the bottom line is, you know, your family, well, let me back up for a minute. If your family lives together, like if you're in a rural farm in the middle of Iowa or somewhere, right? And you've all grown up together and you live near each other, right? Then it's a little different dynamic, right? The nucleus is larger, there's more interaction, you're together. But what you've done is you've created space. And that's one of the things I was talking about earlier. In emergence, moving from repetitive patterns, you make space. And so that's what you've done. You've done that functionally, and you've taken, and you're setting a standard, and you're learning and growing, and you're setting that standard for your kids. Because, you know, the whole point of life is to carry on the species in the grandest scheme of things. And so you've created an environment of love and caring, and you've been able to take the things you learned with you and your husband. Congratulations on a baby. That's really cool. And so you're creating a healthy environment. Your current interaction with your past environment with people that are blood relatives is not healthy. And your job isn't to change them. Your job is to set imagery so that even for your child in their interactions, I'll tell you this, when I was a really little kid, my grandfather on my mom's side is Italian, and part of his family came from Sicily, and they were part of the mafia in New York City. He totally rejected that and became a cop. And took me when I was really little to see the family because they wanted to see me, and I got a chance to see him, and it was like, you know, like a movie in The Godfather. And as we left there, he said, that's the only time you'll see them, because he knew that he wanted to bring me up. He taught me integrity. He taught me right from wrong. I learned a lot of things from him, which was his counter projection to the world he left, right? Because his values were greater. And I never saw them again. And I'm not, you know, the worse for that. So I don't think we can put a round peg in a square hole. And I think at the age people are, because you've actually taken and you've created a healthy underlying structure. They have not. They've stayed in the drama triangle, the victims and the villains. And so that environment, you don't have the ability, because you're not next to them, or an environment where you have multiple periods to be able to help heal that. It's not really there. So what you can only hope is that over time, you know, and they'll come to their senses and recognize and realize. In the meantime, you don't need to be guilty about it. You're just, because it's like we talk about, your past is not your present, is not your future. And you've made a determination to build a healthy future for yourself and your family. And your relatives in that are not part of that equation. Will that change? Yes, you can be hopeful it'll change, but you can't wiggle your nose and change it. That's not your job. And especially when they're all spread all over, you don't have the ability to do that. So I think, you know, from what I'm hearing, you're doing okay. You don't need to feel guilty. It's not the role is opposite. The old elder helped the younger become successful. It's not about the younger helping the elder. It's a downline, so to speak, right? It's you now setting the stage and learning from the things of the past. And, you know, and what you can do is learn to forgive, to be grateful you have parents and they're alive, and leave it at that. And then hopefully over time, they'll change to the point where you'll find a crack and you can make it better. But I wouldn't spend one moment of time worrying about it.
okay. Thank you
Cool.
so much, Dr. A.
You're
Yeah, I
so
appreciate
welcome.
it.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I think we had one more, Rach.
Yes, we do. We have Kathy.
Kathy,
Can you come on camera?
Let's go a little longer. My ski
Right?
instructor is going to shoot me, but that's okay.
You're still muted, Kathy. Come off.
Hey,
mute.
Dr. A, are you in Colorado skiing?
I am. I'm up here. Take a look at this. Just everybody, take a look at how snowy.
Oh, beautiful. I am down just south of Red Rocks Amphitheater in the
Oh yeah, I
foothills.
love that. I love that area.
Yes, in King Carroll.
Yeah.
So my question for you, I know you went over the 7 areas, and I feel like in 6 of those, they are great to good, good to great. And in fact, I have to tell you, we have 8 Optavia coaches and clients that are competing in a natural bodybuilding competition, Muscle Mania here in Colorado, inspired by you and the active line. And
Awesome.
I'm so proud of all of them. But my challenge is on the vocational side. I absolutely love health coaching. I've been in the corporate world, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And it has gotten to the point, Dr. Haight, it's unbearable. I had a coworker throw me under the bus, telling my boss that I also do health coaching and therefore I'm not able, it takes away from my corporate job, which is so not true. But I really struggle with, how do you, in that one area that's challenging, how do you keep moving forward when it's so unbearable? And I know I need to let it slide off my back and just keep doing the do and the daily action steps. But I would love your advice on just getting through this hurdle right now, because I know ultimately what I want to do is health coaching full time. It fills my soul. But it's honestly, it's just really challenging right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear that. And we probably won't be able to fully address that because we're out of time, but let me just give you a couple things to think about. First of all, that person is projecting, right? They're projecting something, a deficit they have onto you, and they're again, calling you out, but you said it, just said it, it's not true, right? It's made up. It's a person, being in mean spirit, probably jealous, and so you can't let, if we worry what everybody thinks about us,
Mhm.
bottom line is we're going to be miserable. So you have to, the good you're doing in both. You're doing good in your job. And I would sit down with your boss, the person that actually is
Mhm.
decision making, and say, I'd love to talk to you. Is there any area where you see in what I'm doing? And just face reality. In reality, not in somebody's story that they made up. In reality, is there anything that you see I'm not doing that I need to be doing in this job? Because basically, I do my job. I'm proud of what I do. I want to be a good in my corporate job. I also enjoy helping people in my free time. But basically, is there any area, is there any truth that you see? And that's the decision maker. So that's the one. And just make peace with that. That's your first step.
Okay.
The others just pursue this and to the point where you no longer need that. That's
Right.
those are the two
Yeah.
things to focus on. Stay based. Reality is an acquired taste, but just
Mhm.
because someone gets in the middle and is either trying to get your job or do something or just doesn't like you, or doesn't matter what it is. Listen, we're not going to be liked by everybody, but sit down with your boss, because that's the part you don't want to build tension and dysfunction, because something that's projected can become a reality over time, and that's what you don't want.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Totally. Thank you so much. You're
So
so
welcome.
inspiring.
You're so
Thank you
welcome.
for the mission.
Yeah, and good luck on that. Okay, let me know how that works
Thank
out.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we're over a few minutes, and I want to thank you all for coming on. What we're doing basically is helping you and others really create health and well-being in their minds. Topic next month is consciousness and you. What does it mean? We want to really dial in so you really understand why this work is so important. It helps separate you and put you in such a stronger position as you work on this. We know, most of us know, we should go to the physical gym or go for walks or do things for our physical health. But most of us really ignore, and we kind of push down into the deep recesses of our mind and our thoughts our feelings and the things that are important. And we want to learn to be able to handle those so you can move through and start to put on your lab coat and really understand our thoughts and our feelings and how we can influence those to actually put us in position to thrive in a time when most people really are suffering in their lives. So with that, I want to thank Rachel and Chris for all their hard work, and let's go out and get the world healthy. God bless.